afternoon, buenas tardes. This is Felix Gardón. I'm your interpreter for tonight. Buenas tardes, soy su intérprete Felix Gardón para esta noche, para ustedes. We're going to be creating a space of language justice tonight. Vamos a crear un espacio de justicia del lenguaje hoy. Reconociendo que el español y el inglés son idiomas coloniales que han tomado muchas de nuestras voces. Recognizing that both English and Spanish are colonial languages that taking away many of our voices. In order to do that, we're going to be using the interpretation feature. Y para hacer eso, vamos a usar la función de interpretación hoy. Once the function is on, you're going to see a little globe that will appear in the toolbar, and you can press on that to choose a language. Choose either English or Spanish. Una vez la función esté prendida, van a ver un globo en la parte de abajo en las cajitas de herramienta. Van a presionar y pulsar en eso y escoger su idioma para poder escuchar tanto en inglés o en español. Por favor, recuerden de hablar despacio y en voz alta para poder ser escuchado correctamente. Please remember to speak in a loud voice and clearly so you can be interpreted correctly. If you're not speaking, si no está hablando, please keep your microphone in silence. Mantenga su micrófono en silencio. Have a great meeting. Tenga muy buena reunión. Ahora la función se va a prender. Now the function is going to be turned on. Una vez la vean, pueden escoger el idioma. Once you see the function, you can choose your language.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to High Arts. My name is Kirya. I'm the curator in residence with High Arts. Just a quick heads up, this conversation is being recorded and broadcast on Facebook. Maybe you're joining us on Facebook. Maybe you're here in the meeting with us. We're so glad you're here. A quick image description. I am a light brown skinned woman with wire rim glasses on, dark curly hair. I'm wearing a dark green halter top with a red and gold floral shawl. Behind me to my right, I'm not sure if it's your left or right because of mirroring screens, are a bunch of plants, and there's a white wall on the other side, and I'm on a dusty pink chair. And I am, as I said, curator in residence with High Arts. And I'm really excited to introduce this conversation to you tonight. I'm joining you from Lenape land in Brooklyn, and my pronouns are she and her. High Arts is a leading cultural hub within the urban arts movement. Through artistic development residencies, vibrant multidisciplinary creative programming, and civic engagement opportunities, we empower artists to develop bold new work while creating a positive, lasting impact on our community. And tonight, we're having our second conversation with our Skylab artist in residence, Benjamin Lundberg, who is, I'm going to read a formal bio and then talk about how I know Ben. So Benjamin Lundberg Torres Sanchez is a queer transnationally adopted person from Bogota, Colombia. They are the founder and co-curator of the performance and exhibition series Sea Coligio, and were the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts 2017 and 2018 Merit Fellow in New Genres and Film and Video, respectively. That was my first time reading that fully out loud, so hopefully I got most of those correct. But also, Benjamin is a longtime friend of mine. We both met in a program here in New York called Emerge NYC. And founded a collaborative relationship that was really instrumental to me personally, and I hope to Ben as well. And we've had many points of connection since. So tonight, while we will be talking explicitly about Benjamin's residency with High Arts and some of the work they've been doing here, we'll also be having a bit of a conversation as two old friends in the trenches of radical queer performance art in New York and beyond. And I'm really excited to do that. Benjamin, do you want to add a little introduction to yourself as well?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kirya, and everybody who is here with us tonight in the meeting and also on Facebook through the stream. My name is Benjamin Lundberg Torres Sanchez. I'm a light-skinned person wearing my hair, my wavy dark hair down tonight. I have 2 gold dangling earrings on. And a green no collar button up shirt. I have 2 bracelets on my wrists, 1 beaded and 1 fabric. And I'm joining you from as an uninvited settler on the traditional lands of the Munsee Lenape, the Canarsie, the Hunkachug, the Matinakak, the Shinnecock, the Rockaway, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I want to give thanks for the stewards of the land, water, and air, past, present, and future. I also want to take time to acknowledge that after there was stolen land, there were stolen people. I want to honor the generations of displaced and enslaved people that built and continue to build the country that we occupy today, which of course rests on Indigenous lands. If you have a good enough view of my earrings, I also want to shout out that you can get them yourself from Elena Soledad of Brooklyn Warmy Designs. There's a link in the chat. How's that for an intro?
That's a great intro. It's particularly like well-rounded. There's something for everyone, including the extremely fashion conscious, which I really appreciate. Something actually, maybe we'll talk about later in this conversation, but if not at another point too, I'd love to have a dialogue about how you arrived at your specific land acknowledgement, because I really do appreciate how specific the namings are there. And I'd like to think about ways to enrich my own, but let's not start fully there in our conversation. I want to talk a little bit about your Skylab residency. So last week, those who got to tune in, we talked specifically about the zine that you co-founded. You are holding this, which pre-existed the residency and is a truly collaborative endeavor with a few other folks. Here in residence with us, you're dealing with some of those very same themes and perhaps even working in some of those same mediums, but there's a more expansive view of things that you're exploring and playing with in terms of medium and craft and use of our space here in New York and I mean in El Barrio, and also otherwise in time and space. So can you talk to us a little bit about what your Skylab residency has been about?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kirya, for the question. Something that I've been learning quickly through a lot of really generous support through the High Arts staff is to be practicing more slowness in my work. And so I came in thinking that I was going to create primarily performance work and some video work. And what High Arts process and support has allowed me to do is focus on some different things, relationships alongside art making. And the things that I'm making art around right now have to do with my own experience as an adopted and fostered person. And thinking specifically about this dynamic where when we talk about representation, sometimes the question is around not being represented enough. And what I am coming to realize is the sort of dearth or the just the so many different kinds of representations of adopted, fostered, or maybe in narrative storytelling, orphaned people um, that are out there in just about every medium that you could think of. And so I'm becoming interested in not only storytelling that emerges from community, from adopted, fostered, and trafficked folks themselves, but storytelling that might also intervene or take to task some of these kinds of tropes or stereotypes that are placed on our experiences. And I want to reference that I'm deeply inspired by the work of the performance artist Sandra Ibarra, who previously went as La Chica Boom. Sandra has explored Mexicanidad or Mexicanness through a similar vein of facing stereotypes and transforming them towards her own exploration and pleasure. And so what I've been doing a lot through this residency is both thinking about what are these tropes or stereotypes. So doing the identification work of that in myself and also in community with other people, because of course, like folks' experiences are varied, and it's really interesting to me to learn about other ways that folks are experiencing this, and then to begin to transform that into imagery. So something that's been very unusual for me is that I've been spending a lot of time making two-dimensional visual art in the form of painting. And from those works, trying to pull out specific materials, scenes, ways that bodies are engaged, and then begin to explore them through performance that is either done for a live audience or pre-recorded in the form of a video. And so, yeah, that's more or less the topic or the way that my work is coming out right now is specifically in address of kind of taking back control or power of storytelling that is really actually quite commonplace in media.
Yeah, that's something I'm grateful to have you and several other adoptees and transracial adoptees specifically in my social circle and artistic circle for many years now, who have really shifted a perspective on adoption and foster care that was handed to me by popular culture. I mean, something even you said recently to me was recognizing how there's a joke about the trope in Disney movies about how they always kill the parents in the first 5 minutes. We're all aware, or many of us are aware of that trope or joke, and few of us think about how that leads to a sort of adopted or foster care myth and mythos as well, like the orphaned child. I hadn't made that connection really, and it's just so prevalent. And there's so much about, you know, Orphan Annie and the Boxcar Children. That's so old, but I read a lot of old books when I was a kid. And it's just a lot of this stuff. It even as long as I've been friends with you and had conversations about this, I still had this separation between these media images of like, yeah, these kids having these adventures, and you as my friend having this identity that you're shaping art around, and how like the chasm between those is so wide. But why should it be, right? Like, what if we had more narratives about adopted people's experiences that were much more rich and nuanced? That was not necessarily needs to be the center of their story, but at least that it shows up in their story in a significant way, as it truly does in the lives of real people, not as like, well, now I don't have these parents to worry about, for example.
Exactly. I think what you're gesturing to, I think, is just kind of a double dynamic that the experiences of adoption or being orphaned provide kind of two avenues for creators. One is to create a blank slate for the character that they can fill with whatever they imagine, or the other being to kind of, how do I want to say this? Well, I think that's really like the main thing that I think is, I more so than adoption, less about a character, but adoption becomes like a petri dish for other things to happen, for other, it's like a context that, ooh, that's really rich and interesting, like what a interesting specific detail for this character, and then it's never to be remarked upon later. There's an HBO show that features 3 transracially and adopted people who are part of a family, and little to nothing is mentioned about adoption through the entire series, but it is their main context, and it's very directly introduced at the top of the show. So just to name a single example. And so I think the other thing that I want to say is that there are more and more adopted people creating things, which is really exciting. But personally, like, I find some limits to the kind of like personal storytelling that people do on that front, and maybe many others. I think that there's, I feel bad because I don't remember their name, but there's a Filipinx artist that talks about different kinds of traps that an artist of color can fall into. And one thing that she says is that the trap of legibility, or being able for our stories to be really easily recognizable, is something to resist. And I think that that's something that I'm interested in as an adopted artist, artist of color, as a queer artist, is how do I take many contexts of identity into the same space where maybe they don't usually live together? And then also, how am I working against being legible? And so how do I think, because part of my work is in critique of systems like adoption and foster care, other kinds of child welfare, child protective sort of systems, the question, the righteous question comes forward often, which is what else do you propose, or what would you like to see different? And I think somehow in my creative practice, I want to resist a quick fix or an easy answer, because I think it, at the end of untangling a lot of these really, really complex systems that have to do with very complex histories, I think that it is our relationships with one another that do a lot of work to begin to untangle those things, and also to build new alternatives that can be really exciting, and also particular and specific to what people need. So.
Thank you for that. I want to come back to that part, the sort of abolitionist politic that you're sewing in there. But I want to go back for a moment to what you're talking about, legibility, as a way in to talk about form a little bit, go back to some of the art you're making.
Thank you.
First, I want to locate myself a little bit too for this conversation, for the audience that doesn't know us as well. So one, I'm a mixed race person. I was raised by a white mother, and I have a Black father. And so I was raised in a context where I was the Black person in a white environment, which is different in many ways, familially and relationally, from a transracial adoptee experience, but has some overlap with being alienated from a culture that is phenotypically how I'm recognized in the world. So there's a lot of resonance I found with other transracial adoptees sharing that experience. That's something that Ben and I have talked about over the years, as well as other folks, particularly Mariama Lockington, to name one person. Mariama Lockington, an author. So legibility is something I too have wrestled with as an artist, and becoming an artist in many ways was a way to preempt the question, what are you? In one frame, for example. what's interesting about Ben and I's meeting is we came together at a point where we were crossing streams, if you will, where I was moving away from performance art and moving more towards what is conventionally known as like legit theater, or a sort of Western conventional theater model, where Ben was moving away from legit theater towards a more like radical experimental performance art. We made a really cool experimental theater piece together in that moment, and then have continued to sort of work on our own. And I've really become more solidly a playwright and actor, and Ben has become more solidly an experimental multimedia performance artist. So that's locating myself and our relationship a little bit. And I love that. I love that about our crossed roots, and the way that when we do collaborate together, it allows for a really interesting shared dialogue. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, even in this residency, you surprised yourself about what you thought you'd be working on and what you ended up working on. So yeah, there's many ways you could enter this, but can you talk a little bit more about the mediums that you're exploring and how you got here?
Yeah, I think I really appreciate you laying out that context. That feels very true to me. I want to talk about what I did last night, which was perform in a queer trans fundraiser festival hosted on Zoom that lasted many hours, long into our night on the East Coast. It ended, I think, at 4 a.m. I didn't stay up that late. But my performance was, solidly after hours at 10:40. And so I think something that my roots are and will always be in theater. And even yesterday I was thinking, oh, am I making theater again? Because I'm taking on a character for this performance. So I'll walk this back, which is that pre the residency, I had created this object, which is like a sculptural object, which is the combination of a pacifier and a silver spoon. So thinking about gratitude and the adopted person, how often money and stability is seen as the solve, or what the child in these systems needs to lead a fulfilling life. And I think not in all cases, but in many, it's very easy to kind of gloss over the severance from land, culture, language, and immediate kin in this. And so I was thinking about if this object is meant traditionally to soothe, to pacify, and this is an emblem of wealth, at least in a US American context, what would it literally feel like to have this inserted into your mouth and throat, and try to keep it there the way that a pacifier would be. And so last night my performance was an attempt to sell this object. And so because of knowing that it was going to be late at night, because I knew it was going to be presented via a screen on this Zoom platform, I chose the setting of the late night home shopping infomercial. And so I've experimented with this a little bit in past work. There's a performance of mine called Naturalization, where I equate the naturalization ceremony to a baptism, and then afterwards preach on behalf of the gospel of naturalization. I'm interested in not saying hey, naturalization, there's some dynamics that are really messy and hard about the way that power is happening, where literally one country is telling you you have to completely disavow your relationship to your home country in order to become this other thing, which is kind of like a Christian baptism, where, okay, whatever sins you have in the past, you are now washed clean, and you are delivered here now as a Christian. Whatever was in your past doesn't matter. But rather than to say that dynamic is no good in naturalization. I rather embraced it as the preacher and like the proselytizer of naturalization. And so I think I'm really interested in what happens if, instead of being like, it's really hard and challenging and complex to be told mainly through popular media, be grateful, period, for your circumstance. What if my performance is to fully embrace that? So last night, on the way to set up my performance, I was thinking of alternative titles for this work, of trying to sell this silver spoon pacifier. And one of the things that I said was like adopted Billy Mays, or like the grateful adoptee drag. So kind of like taking on this persona fully. And so after a few moments of flipping through channels, which I was able to stream live into the Zoom to give you a real like kind of television experience, I appear in my best kind of Billy Mays-esque getup, and with a lot of gusto and excitement, you know, proceed to introduce this object, which I called Silver Lining last night. And not only tell you all of the benefits of this object, how it will help to pacify and silence your young to adult adopted person, but also that I would do a live demo on the infomercial. Since who better to demo this object than an adopted person themselves? I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to do so. And then to allow people to witness like the quite literal bodily struggle of getting, you know, the round end of this fully into my throat and to close my lips around the nipple end of the pacifier, which took many attempts, and it never fully stayed in my throat. And of course, like, it's one of those crying, laughing moments where, you know, I'm describing all of these things that, like, in my excitement, my zeal, should, I think, to the audience come off as like disturbing or make them question like how the emotional register that I'm projecting through the performance is maybe counter to the reality that I'm describing. And so, yeah, last night was a lot of fun to just be playful. And I think often when we discuss like things that are complex and hard in our experiences, like we want people to like, no, you have to listen to me, like this is how it is, I really need you to understand that. And I think like using the technique of humor, of kind of like flipping it, taking it into my body and my persona, and allowing there to be fun and my own joy projected in this space was such a it's something that I've found before, but it's a continued revelation through what I've been able to do at High Arts, and just being like, all of the things that I'm playing with are welcome. So like obsessively looking at media, playing around with video tools, like dancing with this imperfect frame of being in a Zoom call. All of these things can converge. Yeah, in new performance. And so it was just really exciting to be able to bring things, as you mentioned, there's a lot of thinking and creating that pre-existed this residency. But it's here that I've gotten to like spend time really marinating on how is it all going to come together, and how can it still, you know, not be a painting, still be in my performance practice, you know? How can I use visuals and object? I mean, like there were two-dimensional images that are advertising that I used. There's this object, which I consider a sculpture. Like all those elements can still come into a live space and can also still be interactive. I was able to sell 2 of the spoons live on the Zoom last night. So yeah, so that's like an overview of like how some of these things are converging. Yeah, and I think like that's something that I feel really connected to. in our relationship and how we know each other as artists too, is because like I know you as a theatrical performer, a poet, you know, you are a writer, you direct, like you express the craft of theater and the many different kinds of disciplines that are contained within. And so I think I'm also interested like in the way that you might also be thinking about multiple expression right now, because I know that you're working on some things that have gone through many forms and iterations. And so as I was thinking about what the heck did I do last night for this performance, it occurred to me like that this is something that we also share. And
yeah, thank you for your retelling of that performance. You probably saw me cringing, which is, but also giggling, because that's exactly what you evoke with your performance. I mean, you were talking about your joy being displayed, which is clear and evident, and your discomfort. And that's something that I think the performance artist at their best, I think, sort of gets rid of the artifice of the illusion and does the thing. And that's something that I still admire, particularly about the way you do performance art. I think something that like I moved away from performance art as I was experiencing it because one, I came first from spoken word, which was incredibly didactic in a way that I couldn't find the nuance I needed anymore. It was no longer like it served really well as a particular point in my life to be like, this is what I need you to understand. And I've worked really hard at articulating this, and here's exactly what it is. It's like, to me, it is the medium of the teen, of the teenager, of the coming of age and coming into self. And that's not a diss. Like, I think teenagerhood, young adulthood is such a profoundly important part of this stage of human development that we even have that adolescence exists, right? We haven't always had that in our Western culture, at least. And so adolescence is a profoundly important and powerful time. And spoken word to me is an adolescent art form in that way. And I outgrew it. And some people don't, and I don't mean to diss all spoken word artists, some people make many other things with it. But for me, it became limiting. And then performance art, the experimental performance art that I was engaging with, some of it was really compelling and exciting, and but a lot of it was so obsessed with form that it lost meaning. And it was so like, I'm going to do the thing because I can. And then also particularly upsetting to me was, I don't really care about the audience, which to me was unintentional in a way that became violent in some cases, like subjecting people to grotesque action in a public setting without pre-warning, without consent, and without clear grounded purpose. It was dangerous and awful the way I've seen people abuse it. And I also have seen some incredible, what might be described as grotesque performance art that I still remember and love as well. So it's not a blanket sort of critique. It's just I saw it abused in a way that it wasn't quite serving me. What I saw theater doing was tending to the experience of the audience. I mean, theater is an entertainment art. And part of me loved that. And I don't know that I could have named that then, that I would have named that I was so compelled by entertainment, but I think I can say that confidently now. I don't think it diminishes me in a way that I might have as a young radical. I like to entertain. I like to be entertained. I like spectacle. And I like artifice. I like illusion. I like, but, theater was still being a thing more than telling a thing. So it wasn't spoken word. It wasn't didactic. It wasn't abusing an audience by being like, I'm just going to do this thing in front of you because you're here. It was a sort of in-between space for me that I really loved and needed. And also, as you named, I'm still multidisciplinary. I'm still exploring a lot of different things. I have a piece right now that it's an autobiographical work that's fictionalized. That started, so I went home, quote unquote, one of my homes, to the place where I was raised for 10 years, rural Northern California. After many years of not visiting for very long, I went home for like nearly a month. and had a very cathartic experience. And there I was able to go, aha, the story that I've always threatened to write, because I needed that sort of like homecoming catharsis to like have the capacity to envision a narrative that was possible. But it came out in very like scenic sort of images in my mind, almost like a film, but I didn't want to make a movie. So I tried to wrestle into a play because that's my medium these days. And then I accidentally wrote some poems in it. And it still had these long scenic descriptions. And I thought, maybe this is a book. And then I ended up selling it as a book. So I'm writing a book. And it's an interesting thing. So, you know, the audience doesn't know what we've worked on together, Benjamin, but we worked on a few things, including some work at the Morgan Library, where we did some cool experimental stuff in response to like classic European art and modern art of the 20th century that was technically for kids, but very satirical and very politically loaded. That was a really fun period. And then also you directed a play of mine that was also autobiographically inspired. And that one was actually very much drawn from interview text. I translated interview text into monologue and into narrative by pastiching it, like cutting and pasting interview transcripts into a new narrative theatrical work with a cast and music. I'm still exploring these autobiographical, like so much of my work comes from my own narrative as is yours, but then also often distanced. So if not my story as a Black queer person, a Black queer story in history that I deeply resonate with. And then this new work, which is very much drawn from my own life story, but fictionalized in ways to make it a more entertaining, maybe. Yeah, I'm still exploring with medium, but I definitely think I'm drawn more towards like art that is, I dare say like a little more legible, a little more entertaining, has a broader appeal. Not to say that I'm like a Disney Channel kind of girl. I'm certainly like an edgy artist, but there are varying degrees, right? So that's how I found my way into answering your question. I don't know if I quite answered it.
Yeah, thank you, Kirya. It brought up a lot of different things. I'm gonna try to track back through because there was much that you said that resonated with me. One thing is this dynamic of caretaking that I think because theater is a inherently collaborative art form, and I think when I started, like when I got a degree in theater, I realized like, wow, people are here for a lot of different reasons. And I realized like, oh, my pleasure has to do with like sitting in the dark with like friends and comrades, and like just the energy of we're all lifting this thing into being. It was the social space. And now like when I'm with other artists these days, and we're doing the go around the circle, like what, why are you doing this program or this workshop or whatever, I think the most honest thing that I can say is to hang out with y'all. It's really to hang out. Like, I hope that there's some good relationships in this space that I'll carry forward. That's certainly, like, I think in retrospect, the Emerge program that you and I did was the single greatest gift of that time, was relationships. And so, I think theater does cue people into a can cue people into an ethos of, taking care of each other, which when I started to, ushered in by that program Emerge and some of the relationships there, when I started to imagine my performance work in a visual art space through performance art, it was deeply confusing to me. And I remember feeling exactly that sentiment going to my first couple of performance art nights of like, wow, nobody cares at all about the audience. Really don't. And so that actually has become such a huge kind of like driving force in my work, which is that in theater, I saw a lot of failures with interactivity and participation because of the way that theater is traditionally set up, where I'm over here, the performance is over here, I'm being entertained. I saw a lot of times that when participation was called for, it actually resembled much what you're talking about in performance art. Like all of a sudden I'm gonna like grab you into the audience and force you to do this thing, and if you don't do it, then like you're wrecking the moment that I'm trying to create. Why won't you cooperate, kind of vibe. And in performance art, like I saw, oh, things are literally happening, like quite nakedly or transparently happening in space. And people do, because of that, have a little bit more of a portal or a way in, because it's happening right in front of you. There's no separation often in space. And I was very in space between an audience and what's happening. And I feel very always hungry for that. And so even last night on this Zoom performance, like achieving somebody calling in through the fake, home shopping apparatus, making a purchase, following up with me through my personal Instagram later that night and on through today, to like actually exchange money over something that I've created in the world of performance, is both theatrical, but it's actually literally happening. There's an actual exchange happening. My work is like creating a real economy that people are buying and selling in. And because like dynamics of buying and selling are something that I'm interested in looking at in child welfare systems, like it felt really good to be able to have that kind of like ability to really contact the audience. And so for my work, like I don't want to just do a thing in front of folks because I can. I'm also, from theater, really interested in caretaking. And I think like something that, as my work also rests as advocacy and thinking about systems in a different way, I think it's critical that I consider how are people going to not just be immediately excluded from a conversation, turned off by its expression. What are ways that I can make invitations in, while also not to use a pun, no pun intended, but like to not spoon feed people what it is that they're supposed to do. And I think in an age where there's like a lot of very easily digestible content on Instagram, the crisis du jour like comes into our field of vision. We rapidly consume 10 slides on Instagram of like what we're supposed to do about it or think about it. I want folks to rest with the question or take that away. And I also want folks to not just witness as an individual person in the way that like, I think that's what I love about the social space of theater too, is like the going out to eat afterwards, or like in the lobby, the coming together moment. Like that's the payoff for me, even more so than the adrenaline of performing and being on stage is the feedback loop. And so I'm like, why not? I just want that happening during the whole experience. And so these days I've been just thinking a lot more about invitation. Like, what invitation am I making? How am I being a good caretaker or steward of the experience so that people can meet that that invitation? And how do I in some way influence people to I think when theater is not set up just in a straightforward kind of like the performance is over there, I'm here, but when like theater in the round or in a thrust stage where you can see audience across the way, that's the exciting moment for me, is when people lock eyes over the thing that you're doing in the center, or that you've set up for people to play inside of. And there's energy exchange that is happening between two people who are not the performance. That's what I want so badly.
With that invitation, I have to invite the audience to ask us some questions, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's the mandate. So those of you who are joining us in the Zoom meeting, you can just type right into the chat, or if you want to even come on the mic and ask us a question if you have one. And if you're on Facebook, there should also be someone monitoring the Facebook if you want to ask a question in that platform as well. So yeah, we welcome any questions.
And there's also, my invitation is that there's no wrong questions or no question too small.
No question too small, absolutely. Ben, you might have had other points also you wanted to make if you want to speak a little bit while we're waiting for questions to come in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kirya. I mean, I think that you and I feel like really full in this conversation. I hope other people are taking something away from it too. Yeah, I think that something that I'm realizing this is a totally different avenue of thought, but something that I'm realizing in trying to address trope and stereotype is just that I will go through long stretches in a week, like several days at a time, without working on anything because it just dawns on me way later. It's because like it's hard. It's like emotionally difficult, you know? And so that's another thing that I've felt really held by in my relationships with high arts, is just that like I'm not on the hook to produce anything. And so just like also taking care of myself in that has been a new kind of opening up and journey. And I'm seeing Erin, who from high arts, who is inhabiting multiple roles right now as interim ED and programs director, yeah, is asking me, how has the recent pandemic changed my approach to my art or how I make art currently? Great question, because it's been really difficult to make performance. That's my answer. And I don't know, Kirya, if you also resonate with that, but I think like there is something about being in physical space and being able to feel the energy of people that is really, really important. And I think, you know, last night there was a specific invitation to call me, have a conversation over speakerphone, and to purchase something. But without a kind of framework like that, you know, I've found myself in other Zoom performances just really left wanting. And I know that's my selfish desire for like, what is the energy that's returning? And so that's why even with the conversations that High Arts has been hosting through my residency, my desire to have a Zoom meeting rather than a webinar is exactly for that reason. It's because like I want to see some faces on screen. I want to see things in the chat and folks nodding along or not, you know, like I want feedback. So yeah, I think, but Erin, on the like form question of that, I've been doing a lot more visual art and a lot more research, you know, like this is a hibernation time, I feel, you know, so like really digging into like, okay, I'm an adopted person who was fostered for, you know, only a few months. What is the state of the foster care system in the United States? Like, what is my responsibility and like desire inside of the work that I'm doing to make those connections, you know, and do research. So I think that's been another huge aspect of how the work has shifted as well. I'm seeing two more questions. Emily asks, can you share some of the visual art that you're working on that informed yesterday's performance? Yeah, I mean, I have some right here. And oh, I'm mirrored. Wow, I actually don't get the mirror. this is like an expression of thinking about the trope of adopted person as a gift. And so just really specifically like evoking something that's like bound, something that is like objectified, a product for sale, I think. And so I'll
Can you
say,
give a quick visual description of that painting?
yeah, thank you for inviting me to do that. So what I'm holding is a light brown canvas that has the image of a child or young person wrapped in blue wrapping paper that is then again wrapped in cellophane, that has some dark blue ribbon wrapped around the head, neck, and knees, has a kind of bow on the top that you would imagine on a birthday present, and a bright red tag that's hanging off of the side, which is the back of the neck. And so to make a quick connection, like a lot of imagery that I'm thinking about right now comes from the marketplace, comes from commercial spaces. And so that when I'm, this piece also gave me the idea of wrapping paper as a material. And I know that through some of the high arts communications and e-blasts and other things that people might have encountered online, another performance experiment that I did in video was just pressing my face through a stretched piece of wrapping paper until it burst open. And so like, I have some ideas of where that's leading, but right now it rests as like just one performance action. Like, as Kirya was saying earlier, the literal thing I can do, burst through a piece of wrapping paper. And so there's lots of things that like, I think it evokes struggle to like be unbound. It evokes birthing, but maybe of like my own making. And so those are kinds of ways that I take like, okay, this image of a wrapped kind of bound child. Then I'm like, okay, but I'm not a child, I'm an adult. And so like, how do I translate that to my body? What do I want to do with that material? And so right now, what I'm finding is that I'm like kind of stepping into the world of the painting and pulling material out. And so the high arts residency and what it's like really inviting me to do so much is build a world. You know, I can put down images, I have sketches in my notebook, you know, and I think like that's why television or even video games is so interesting to me as storytelling, is because like there's a whole universe. Or like Kirya and I will like geek out about the extended universe of Star Trek, or like other people like are really love like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, for the way that it brings maybe divergent stories into conversation with each other. So I know that we're short on time, so I want to, Betsy asks, my mom asks, is it possible to explain the way that you use the physical space of high arts on a daily or maybe weekly basis? That's a great question. So like I'm in my home office, studio, pantry, garden right now. A 10 by 10 space in Brooklyn. So like maybe that's familiar as a context to people. Of limited space and many multi-use. But what's great about having access to the high art space in Harlem is that I have access to a black box theater that I get to go to virtually anytime that I want, and that's available, which is an incredible gift on its face. So I have room to stretch out, try things. That piece that I mentioned of trying to burst through this piece of wrapping paper, which happened in like such a small scale here, I reperformed as like an experiment at High Arts in a 4x4x4 cube of wrapping paper. So I just have more space. I can't do that at home. You know, and that allows me to push the research forward, actually. You know, I learned recently that, at least at the time of the writing of a book that I was reading, that each person on the planet has 4 square feet of retail space devoted, if you took all of the retail space in the world and divided it by the number of people who are here, we each have 4 square feet. And so I thought, that's supposed to be like my relationship as a buyer or a consumer. But what if I flip it and like that's the space that I have allotted to be the object or the thing for sale, you know? So yeah, I just have more space, and I try to go twice a week, like from 10 to 6, like make it a work day. Yeah, but in June I'll have, like, since we're not doing public programs, I'll probably go more. But yeah, I've tried to make the commitment between teaching and other work to devote 2 full days a week to going. Yeah.
And you also had an intimate family style dinner at the space as well.
Oh yeah, thanks for, yeah. I mean, it's really been amazing because there's been these public facing things like the talks, and even getting to use High Arts as like, yeah, like a studio to do last week's talk, a studio to do a live performance last night on Zoom, you know, like, but then also we had a dinner that we called a family dinner between myself and one of the contributors to the zine that was referenced earlier, You Are Holding This, which is the abolitionist zine for adopted and foster folks. And then 3 women who are my elders, who I greatly admire and I'm in community with, who are doing work with the to critique and dismantle the administration of children's services in New York City through the Abolish NYC ACS campaign. So Abolish New York City Administration of Children's Services campaign. And so it was just incredible also to stage this conversation over food and get to watch, you know, just witness 3 people who I deeply admire be in deep conversation for hours, you know, hours beyond what we had scheduled. And just to sit in their presence and learn from them was incredible.
I'm so sad I missed that, but this has been a great conversation. I think we could continue, but we're going to have to wrap up to honor our audience's commitment and the gracious interpreters.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you who tuned in with us on this Zoom meeting, and those that are tuning in on Facebook and may watch it in the future. Thank you for your future watching. Please check out High Arts. Go to the link that my colleagues will post on Facebook and in the chat shortly to check out more about High Arts. And then Ben, is there a place that you'd like folks to follow you on social media?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the same thing. I just put it in the chat. I use the same name on everything from Instagram to Twitter to my link tree, which you can find. So I keep a lot of things that are happening with me in my link tree, which you can find on my Twitter or Instagram. But it's all Ben J of a Man, which is in the chat. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, friend. It's really always great to talk to you. And thank you, all the staff at High Arts, for all the work that you do to make the space a place that I'm proud to bring my friends into. And thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I will also just echo deep appreciation, Kirya, Aaron, and Eleanor on the call tonight, supporting our interpreters and everybody who turned up to see this in the moment and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.